about to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Sorry about that. Hello, I don't know where Craig is. This is very strange, but I will get him
still
on the
here.
screen. You are still here. Don't know why you've
I am
disappeared
still
from
here.
there. That's very slick and
here.
professional. I do, do apologise. Don't know what happened then. Good evening and welcome to our first. You can tell it's live. It's genuinely live. Our first Tutor Do Sociology live stream of this academic year, and it's lovely to be here. How are you, Craig? You all right?
I'm good, Duncan. Yeah, look, raring to go. I mean, it's been a few months since we've done one of these, so
It has been
Let's
not
get
since
ready.
not since the lead up to the exams. It's possible there are some people here who've been to some of these before, because some of you might have come along in year 12 and be familiar with the format. You can also see my daughter crawling along in the background there on the slightly unusual. Anyways, we'll go viral.
you can definitely tell it's live.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, what was I saying? Yeah, so you might be familiar with the format, but if not, we'll just give you a quick explanation. It's probably slightly different from last year anyway. We're going to do a range of activities for about half an hour or so, but as well as some activities, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the topic of the day, which in this case is education policies, and
Everyone's favourite.
We've deliberately picked topics that teachers identified as ones that people sometimes struggle with, and so hopefully this will help and you will struggle less after we've discussed them for a bit today. Should we get cracking with I think we've got a bit of a starter activity before we get going with the rest of it. Just bear with me a second. Something's gone wrong. There you go. It's all happening today. Right, here we go. So just to get started, just before we get going with it, I'm going to ask you to crack the code. So by this, I want you to put these in order, and the order we're after is the order they were first introduced. Now, just while you're thinking about this, hopefully an answer will come in really quickly. Zip, zip, zip. Get the right code. You'll sometimes, like in the textbooks and other resources, it'll mention what year policies were passed, and that isn't necessarily critical information, but it is useful to know roughly when things happen and what order they are, and whether things still exist. Whether they're current policies or policies from the past. So it is useful to have a think about this. So this is a nice general. What order did these things happen? There might be some policies in there that either you're unfamiliar with or you've forgotten about. The free school meals reception to year 2, that's universal free school meals we're looking at there. So that's when all children at primary school in Key Stage 1 got a free school meal, rather than it being means tested as it is for the rest of school dinners. So when was that introduced? We've also got the British values. That was when it was introduced that schools should focus on British values and embed British values into the school day. Free schools is not about schools being free. It's about the introduction of a particular type of school called free schools, which were like essentially new academies. Essentially, they were like schools outside local authority support, the kind of independent schools, but independent schools that you don't pay for, like an academy.
Mm-hmm.
No one's coming in with a code. Anyone? It's okay to it's better to have a go.
Yeah, I'm just noticing this is on YouTube. It's saying unlisted, so I don't know if that has anything to do with the chat.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So it might. There's no chat. I've got this up on YouTube as well, so we can kind of see some of the chat responses, but there's no chat on. So it might be that sort of like some people might not be able to access it on the chat. Oh, somebody's come up. Oh, there you go. Proves me wrong. Eve's come up with EFBCDA.
Oh, that's phew.
There you go.
I was just trying to work out what I could do about that there, but there's loads of people coming in now.
Yeah, now it's good.
That's okay. People can chat. That's all right.
That's right for a moment.
Yeah, I wonder if people can only access it through the website and not directly at YouTube. Then that's if someone could answer that on the thing, whether you're watching this through the GTG website or on YouTube.
I've accessed it via the tutor2u.net. And then you click on, and it takes you to a YouTube page.
Yeah.
So
I'm just wondering if it hasn't come up on YouTube, because obviously that would reduce our live viewership. If not, I'll edit it later. But it's a bit difficult now. You had to go through the website, hasn't it? Yeah. That's sort of.
He's on YouTube, so there's a bit about.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we're okay. All right. It didn't. Okay, yeah, I think maybe people are generally watching it through tutor2u on YouTube, kind of thing. Okay, that's fine. I might try and see if I can do something later, but probably afterwards now. There's quite a few of you watching anyway, so that's good. And I apologise that if people have struggled. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at the answers. We've had lots of answers. Shall we see what the...
Eve's gone with, to start off with, she's gone with Sure Start as the first one. Mm-hmm. Then F, free schools. B, British values. C, Ofsted. D, free school meals. And A, T levels. That's very close.
That looks pretty good, doesn't it? It's pretty close. Yeah,
very close. Yeah. Tasnima's gone with E, F, C. Oh, she's slightly changed that order there. C, B, D, A. And Sarah's gone C, E, F, D, B, A. So she said Ofsted first. And that one is correct.
Yeah. So we have a look. So it was Ofsted first. That goes right back to... It says 1988 there. That was when it first kind of mooted because it was kind of the idea stemmed from the 88 Education Act. It didn't actually come into force until a few years later, but still nicely before Sure Start, which was a New Labour policy, 1998. Free schools came in under the coalition. Michael Gove, some of his early reforms have included introducing free schools along with kind of academisation. We're going to talk about a lot of this in a few minutes. Free school meals also happened during that government, but it was a Liberal Democrat-led policy, but again from that coalition government. And British values came in under that government too. And that was David Cameron kind of led initiative when he was talking about the idea of kind of integrating people, and it was I think we're going to talk about it later in terms of what functions of education that might link to, so I won't give away too much at this point. And finally, T levels were meant to come in a bit earlier than 2022, but that was their first when they were first taught. Obviously COVID got in the way, but that was a sort of new generation of vocational qualification, and again we might say a little bit more about that in a moment.
There's not a very big uptake of T levels across the UK. Obviously they're kind of first examined this year, but that's certainly one that is it's worth talking about. So obviously there was a question this year about on last year's exam about vocational education. And obviously sort of like T levels fits into that. What we're going to do in these sessions is we're going to take you through a little bit of kind of knowledge in the background, and we're going to take you through some kind of top tips for sort of like the exams and sort of like the ways in which the exam is structured. So what we're going to look at first of all is, particularly when we talk about educational policies, you look at the specification points, right? And this tells you what they could potentially ask you questions on the exam. And I've taken this from the AQA specification. There are a number of different types of policies that AQA could examine you on. And we're going to go through the first three of these. We're going to look at the first three of these in this session. And next week, we're going to look at the other one, which is impacts of globalization on educational policy. But it mentions that there are policies of selection. Now, we're going to do an activity in a minute where we get you to pick out some policies of selection. This is the ways in which pupils are sorted by ability, if you like. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be academic ability. It can also be financial. Okay, so that's something to focus on there. So we think about some of the policies of selection. We'll discuss those in a moment once we've done the activity. Marketisation and privatisation. Now, this is the one that lots of students kind of get two of them confused. They often overlap with each other. But essentially, in an exam, if you're asked about marketisation, they will either ask you specifically about marketisation policies, or they may ask you about policies that improve choice and or competition between schools. So this is anything, right? These marketisation policies, more often than not, are more contemporary than other policies. We usually see the period of marketisation starting around the late 1980s, and I don't want to give too many policies away just now because of the future activities we're doing. But it would be the idea that parents and children could choose what schools they went to, what types of schools they went to, where they went to a school, and the schools would compete in order to gain pupils. So not only does it talk about sort of like how they compete with each other, but also how the idea of competition is framed. Okay, so how can we compare one school and another school? So these are some of the things they talk about with marketisation. With privatisation, this is about public money that is given to the education system being spent on private companies. Now, this can be either in education or of education. So there's a number of different ways we can look at privatisation of education. So it can be the actual school is run by a private business, different from private schools because they existed a long time ago. It's schools that may be run by private businesses. Again, I don't want to give away too much because we're going to do an activity on it. And then there's privatization in schools, and this is services that are provided to schools that schools will purchase using money from the state and then have them in their schools. The other one to look out for is greater equality of opportunity or outcome. Now, these can be called compensatory policies, policies to tackle inequalities, and there's a number of different examples that we can go through of those. This is basically the kind of policies that try to level the playing field for students, that try to tackle some of the inequalities in wider society by putting forward an educational policy. And on the bottom, we've put there, one of the key things to note about educational policies is that there can be an internal policy, that is one school putting forward a policy, or they can be external. And this is, it's been imposed by the government. Okay, so sometimes you might get questions about, so for a few years ago, there was a question about about selection policies, and you could use policies that are applied by the school itself, so just that exist in that one school, or you could use policies that are applied by the government as well. So you can talk about internal policies and external policies. With that done, we're going to look at an activity here where we're going to try and get you to categorize some of the policies into whether they are a selection policy or whether they are a marketization policy. So we have 8 policies up on the right hand side of the screen. We have league tables, converter academies, entrance exams, open enrollment, specific uniform suppliers, setting and streaming, the tripartite system, and free schools. Now, we've mentioned some of these already. Again, I didn't want to go too much into them, but think about selection. This is how we're going to sort kids based on ability, either financial or academic. Marketization, how we might give consumers, that is parents and children, more choice, or how we might get the schools to compete with one another. And that might help you to sort these into selection or marketization policies.
And there are 1 or 2 tricky ones in here, which is nice.
There are.
Yeah, here we go.
So let's go. Let's 60 seconds. Just put in, you might put in selection and then the numbers, marketization and the numbers. Or S.
You don't have to do all of them at once. If you know 1 or 2, do those. Nice dramatic music.
So ANOH, ANOH, ANOH. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It said S1, league tables and selection policy. Marketization is 1, league tables from ARIA. 7M, tripartite system is a selection policy. Yeah. Open enrollment under marketization.
Okay. So we've got some disagreement in the. We've got some
Entrance
disagreement.
exams of selection.
Yeah.
From Eve. I'm gonna leave it for a couple of seconds because we seem to have a slight lag.
Little lag,
so
absolutely.
More will come through. Entrance exam selection. 5 is a selection policy to specific uniform suppliers. That's a good shout. And on H8 is M, free schools and marketization policies.
We'll give people a couple of goes. Or one or two contradictory ones up higher up where people have suggested the same policy was either marketization or selection, which is fine. I can see why you might do.
There is the possibility.
Yes, it is possible that a policy. No, but it is
that
possible.
A selection policy can also be part of marketization.
Yeah, absolutely, it is possible.
So
quite a few policies have more than one.
Yeah.
Intention or potential, certainly more than one outcome, whatever its intention was.
And that's something.
Indeed, one of the things on here, some people would argue, is going to come up as a selection policy, and some people might say, well, it's not wasn't intended to be a selection policy, and we could debate whether it was or not. Depends whether you read Tough and Brooks or not.
That's right. Okay, let's look at our. I was going to mention Tough and Brooks as well. Yes, let's look here. Okay, so selection policies, and again, we're talking about internal and external. So things like setting and streaming, the way in which you're sorting students by ability, that can be seen as an example of internal selection policy. So the ways in which kids are put into different sets and streams based upon their academic ability or their perceived academic ability, I should say. 5, specific uniform supplies. Now, somebody did get this one. It's kind of gone an off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Specific uniform suppliers. Now, there's been legislation around this. What we mean by specific uniform suppliers, recent legislation has suggested that schools are going to be limited in the amount of specific suppliers they could use, or amounts of uniform that can be provided by a specific supplier to try and keep the costs down.
Yeah.
But as Duncan mentioned earlier on, Tulfin Brooks in their research in 2009 found that many schools will choose specific suppliers to price out working class kids from going to that school. So the cost of a school uniform can be a barrier to them being entered. So it can be seen as being an internal selection policy.
Yeah. And it would
The
be
government is
considered
trying to
covert.
tackle that.
Yeah, it would be considered covert selection. It's not like upfront. Obviously, a lot of schools would come back and say that's not the, we want to have the school logo on t-shirts and things for reasons of integration and other functions of education. It's not designed
and also to market the school, maybe.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably have policies where people can get second-hand uniform and things like that, and so would challenge the idea that it's designed to be selective. But obviously, if you
research into
I was just going to say
COVID selection.
Yeah, there is. I was going to say, if you don't have, it doesn't have to have a particular crest or whatever and that kind of thing, then it opens the possibility of being able to buy the uniform from supermarkets and things where it might be a lot cheaper than from a specialist supply.
Yeah. Entrance exams, of course, many areas of the country have entrance exam. Many areas of the country will have entrance exams for grammar schools, even though the tripartite system, which is very much a selection policy, even though that doesn't really exist.
Certainly not on national level.
In certain areas of the country where you do have entrance exams for schools, even state schools, or state-funded schools, we should say. Marketisation policies, these ones are probably slightly more straightforward. League tables, yes, is a marketisation policy. It's the ways in which schools are compared with one another, which gives parents more choice, but also schools are competing. Open enrollment allows schools to compete for consumers from anywhere in their vicinity. Free schools, we would see it as being increasing parental choice, so therefore is a marketisation policy. And converter academies. Now, converter academies are those that got to choose to become academies after the Academies Act in 2010. It was usually converter academies tend to do better than the other form of academy, which escapes me for the minute. What's the type of academy? There's converter academies and the one for forced academisation.
Yeah. City centre academies, but originally weren't they? But there is another word for the ones that are made to.
Me for the moment, but I will try and remember it.
To do.
Okay, so there are your two. They are your two sets of categories. Let's move on. And another, will selection policies be an exam question in the paper? I don't know what's going to be on the paper, but they have asked a question about selection policies before.
Could easily get one, like two ways in which schools might try and select their pupils, or two policies that
I want to say that was about 2022 or 2023. There was a question on selection policies. It was a 4-marker, I think, or a 4-marker or 6-marker, ways in which schools selection policies, disadvantages of selection policies, I think it was.
Yeah. You could easily imagine a 10-marker. And a general policy type 30-marker, then you might well talk about a range of functions potentially in it, which could include selection policies.
Yeah. The key thing when you're looking at policy is they often talk about the key aim of the policy. So it might be that the aim, for example, there was a 30-marker a few years ago, the aim of marketisation policies is to promote choice and competition, or the aim of educational policies to promote choice and competition is hinting at marketisation. So you need to be able to select which policies fit into that description of marketisation, which policies fit into tackling inequality, which policies might create a selective education system. The other key thing about educational policies, we can really use these in our analysis when we are particularly in questions on the functions of education. They're really quite useful for getting in your higher order skills by being able to make the connections between the functions of education, that are set out by our functionalists, and even sort of like, for example, sort of like some of the Marxist theorists who would talk about different functions of education, and how governments have intervened to restore those functions. So you can use it as a bit of analysis, or you can also use it potentially as a bit of evaluation to support the idea. So, for example, we've put up here some of the main functions of education are things like reinforcing social solidarity, ensuring a competitive workforce, ensuring specific norms and values are transmitted to children. Well, in order to do so, governments often intervene and put policies in place. So whilst you may describe, for example, if we talk about social solidarity, you might talk about Durkheim's views on social solidarity, you can reinforce that by picking a policy that has aimed to improve social solidarity in schools. So it can be built into your analysis, or potentially, depending on the way you word it, you could use it as a positive evaluation, a positive judgment to say, yes, it does still happen. It is still relevant. This is a policy that proves it. I'm not telling you which policy does, because we're going to spin the wheel in a minute and show you. So in this activity, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a range of different functions of education. Okay, range of different functions. And we want you to identify a policy that fulfills this function. So I've just mentioned social solidarity there, passing on norms and values, promoting equal opportunities, preparing pupils for work, the teaching of specialist skills, and tackling inequalities. The governments will often look to bring in policies that reinforce these functions. So the functions that were originally set out by our functionalists, things like Durkheim, Parsons, even Davis and Moore, even some of the more critical theorists who talk about sort of like preparing students for work. Is there a policy that prepares students for work that you can use to back that up? So we're going to spin it round and see which policy we're going to pick first. Oh, sorry, which function we're going to try and apply a policy to first.
Spin, spin, spin the wheel. Where will it land?
Let's see which of these. Okay, so can we identify a policy that has been put into place that helps reinforce the function of education, that is the teaching of specialist skills? Are there any educational policies that have tried to reinforce the idea that schools should teach you specialist skills? This one might be true. We've mentioned one already. We have very early on.
Oh,
and for some reason,
you didn't see those.
Olivia, introduction to vocational courses, excellent.
Brilliant.
That would be a really good example.
Yeah,
such as use that to back up.
Yeah, we could give some examples of vocational qualifications potentially. That I did reveal it there by. Sorry, I was trying to move something and it popped up a bit quickly. T levels,
T levels. Well done. Mentioned T levels. Yeah. We could go with quite a few different policies that have looked to the teaching of specialist skills. Of course, there is the now. I don't know. It's kind of in flux, isn't it? I think it's been abandoned. The idea of students sitting English and maths to 18 might be revisited. I don't know. But obviously that was a conservative idea when they were going to bring in the British standard, teaching of specialist skills, things like English and maths. Largely what we would focus on here is vocational education with this. So introduction of T levels, BTECs, some qualifications you may not have heard of, things like GNVQs, that can also be sort of like seen as reinforcing that function, although many GNVQs were done in the workplace rather than schools, or they were done in further education colleges.
Yeah, there's also things some of which probably still happens, but was more in vogue sort of perhaps 10 years ago or so, but lots of new things for encouraging IT skills and computing skills, when there was a sense that was going to be very much the future of the economy, was going to be that, things like the European...
kind of gone off.
Can you still hear me, Craig? The European computer driving license and things like that. Am I still being heard? You there, Craig? I don't know if Craig... we're having it all today.
Here.
I can hear Craig, but I'm getting the impression Craig can't hear me. Can you hear me, audience? Can someone in the audience, if you can hear me, can you just click, yes, I can hear you? Oh, I can hear that Craig can... Oh, no, Craig's disappeared. Oh, no. You can hear me. Craig's lost his connection. I'll get him back on now. Here we go. Hopefully that's Craig back. Oh, he's in the green room. How do I? Hang on. You're there, Craig. Can you hear us again now?
I can hear you again now. I don't know why I seem to cut out then.
No.
Yeah, so we were talking about the teaching of specialist skills. I don't know what you've done, but I kind of went out of some reason. I got cut off there.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Let's spin it again. Let's see what we can do. You can tell this is live, and you can tell it's the first one of us.
Yeah, it'll all be much smoother after.
Quite a few bloopers for the Christmas reel.
Yeah, we'll do the blooper reel for Christmas.
Yeah.
I think the thing I was saying when we weren't sure whether anyone could hear us was things like the European computer driving license and things like that. There was that's quite a lot of years ago now, but there were the stuff for making sure that people could competent with IT. Yeah.
Even things like employability skills, trying to embed employability skills into the curriculum. They're all examples of sort of like how we try to teach specialist skills. Work experience, bringing in work experience into schools. When your school has one of these days where they invite individuals in from business and industry, and you have your mock interviews and things like that. These are all ways in which schools can, the teaching of specialist skills. So let's go again.
All right, yeah. Here we go. I'll try not to reveal the answers too quickly this time. Suggested answers.
Okay. Oh, very similar. Preparing pupils for work. So it's a very similar answer.
Yeah. Shall we try and see if we can come up with some different ones? Because are there?
So how might school prepare you for work? And we've kind of given half the answers already.
I'm just trying to think what could we have other than teaching of specialist skills, I suppose, because teaching of specialist skills is one way of preparing pupils for work, but there are other ways. What else could we have? It's nice to find that the spinner is random, because I sometimes suspect it's planned in advance. But there are other ways. Not just vocational education. How else might education prepare you for work? I mean, so just people on here are doing A levels, but is school still preparing you for work, even though you're not doing a vocational qualification? In which case, in what way?
We could also look at some of the other ones as well. So like careers advice, yes, could be.
Mock interview practice, career advice.
Yeah.
What about maybe think about, you could sort of think laterally here and think about some of the studies.
Hidden curriculum. Excellent.
Hidden curriculum, well done. CV sport's good as well, I know. Hidden curriculum. So some of the ways, things like...
It's not specifically a policy, but certainly the hidden curriculum does prepare people for work.
And there are policies that relate to the hidden curriculum that might prepare you for work. Things like uniform policies. We don't always talk about government policies, we sometimes talk about school policies. Uniform policies might prepare you for work, because it's like what you might need to wear at work, dress codes.
A long time ago, I worked at a school, and they brought in people from the RAC Academy, the Royal Automobile Club Academy. This is back when sort of like 14 to 19 provision was going through a bit of a trend where kids could leave school at 14, go and work somewhere else. Go and be educated somewhere else on a vocational course and come back. And they would dress the 14, 15-year-olds who would come into the school to do their other GCSEs alongside what they were doing at the RAC Academy, would come in dressed like RAC mechanics. They would have the RAC polo shirt, the kind of combat pants. They were preparing them through their uniform. And
you might often find colleges that do courses on I'm trying to think
what's the...
hair and beauty. They might wear hair and beauty uniform. I was thinking I'm trying to think of the proper term for if you're a steward on an aeroplane. What's the not an air? I'm trying not to say air hostess basically, but anyway, I've said it now. But what cabin crew? That's it. Yeah, cabin crew. Yeah, and that kind of thing. You'll often find if people are doing courses on that at college or whatever, especially if it's through, supported by an airline or something like that, they'll wear the uniform in the college setting.
Let's reveal what we got. Yeah. Some of these we've already kind of gone through it here already. So focus on maths and English in the curriculum. Maths and English is all the way through the curriculum. There's been a huge focus on it. Things like compulsory resits. If any of you are 16, 17 and you did not get your grade 4 in your maths or English, and you may be still doing A levels, but you may be asked to, or it's a condition of your funding that you continue to do study until you get your grade 4, or may even be a grade 5 in English or maths. Other ones that we could put up there, so things like tackling inequalities. I'm sure you could think of a few policies that tackle inequalities, whether it be redesigning the curriculum. Social solidarity, the one that we kind of hinted at was British values. Passing on norms and values. Again, the design of the curriculum transmits certain norms and values onto other people.
Again, British values.
Again, British values, yeah. Promoting equal opportunities. There's lots of things like aim high, aim higher, pupil premium. These ideas that sort of like what we're doing is we're trying to promote, well, I'll say that's kind of more of a compensatory policy rather than equal opportunities. But the idea is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote under groups that traditionally don't go on to university, may go on to university, even promoting equal opportunities, things like GIST and WISE, getting more girls into science and technology subjects.
Or indeed policies that sort of link to kind of the idea of education being meritocratic. You could also link to the idea of promoting equal opportunities as well.
Yeah. Okay, so our next activity, we're going to look at evaluation now. So we've looked at a little bit of analysis and a little bit of kind of application of sort of like policies to the functions of education. Now we're going to think about our evaluation. The evaluation comes up in the longer essay style questions. You could potentially develop a point in a 10-mark apply and analyze, but in a 30-mark essay, if you were to get a 30-mark essay on educational policies, you need to be able to explain how effective that policy was in setting out to achieve its aims. Now, one of the acronyms that we frequently use at Tutor to You for evaluation is SCALE. And this acronym suggests that when you're making an evaluation, you're making a judgment on how effective something is, how effective an argument is usually. So we can either support that with a strength, we could criticize it, that's the C, we could put forward an alternative view. This is often done when we're talking about different theories. A limitation, what does it not explain? Or another piece of evidence to support that view, or reject that view even. So we're going to show you a couple of ways in which a student has we're going to paraphrase a student's argument about a certain policy. We're going to spin the wheel, and it's going to come up with, we want you to give it either a strength, a criticism, an alternative, a limitation, or a piece of evidence to support. So let's see the statement. So the expansion of academisation to allow schools to opt in, this is the converter academies, has promoted more choice for parents over the type of school that they can send their children to. So the students made the point that academisation has given parents more choice. We need to make a judgment on whether that's the case. Let's see what type of judgment we're going to make. What type of evaluation we're going to provide. Okay, an alternative view. So this view really is kind of very much echoes the kind of new right view. Just to answer a question here, academisation, right? Academisation kind of happened in several waves. The first wave of academisation is where they took underperforming secondary schools, usually in city areas, and they combined them together and allowed a business to come in to run them. Okay, they attracted extra funding, new buildings, they closed down the older schools, and they created a brand new school that was run by a business. It was run efficiently, and it became named a city centre academy. Okay, then in 2010, under the Academies Act, because the city centre academies were seen to be successful, the then coalition government allowed other schools to convert to becoming academies and attract business investment. So what they would get is they would get a business running the school. Okay. Now, many of you will possibly go to an academy now. It was the process of turning the old comprehensives, or the old secondary schools, into academies. Okay. So
So
that
in terms
hopefully that
of
explains
yeah,
academisation.
so
And
in terms of
some,
how they differ from another type of state school is it's partly how they're managed. So they're not managed directly from the education authority. They are, as Craig was saying, run by a business. That's not necessarily a business in the sense of like it can be like more like a trust.
yeah,
They're rather than a sort of profit making organisation.
it's a private company.
Yeah, but it is a private company that runs it, a not for profit company essentially.
So in your
And
area where you may have some academies that are run by either part of an academy trust, which is a private company that will take funding from the government and then use it to run the school, or you might have what we see as being called often they're called comprehensive schools still. What you might have is you might have a school that gets its funding directly from the local authority. The local authority will decide how much money it needs, or based on the number of students it's got, and they will tell them how to run it.
in terms of practical differences,
Mm.
it, it's seen. I'm trying to say it in a neutral kind of way. It gives the school more independence to make
Hmm.
decisions, or at least it gives the academy trust more independence to make decisions rather than those
Yeah,
being kind of imposed on them by the local government.
yeah.
It might open the way to more funding or different sources of funding. It
Hmm.
also, of course, might impact on contracts of employment and things as well, which just doesn't affect the
Hmm.
education necessarily, but might affect the people who are working in the schools. But,
No.
yeah.
So that's the process of academisation. What the students put up here is the expansion of academisation to allow schools to opt in has promoted more choice for parents over the type of school they can send their children to. This is very much a new right view. So what might be an alternative view? What else might people say about academies? If parents have more choice, do all parents have more choice? Excellent, Livia.
Oh,
Really useful, because what you've done is you've also thrown in a study there to fill it in. Livia's talked here about Gowitz, ball and bow, and sort of the idea of the three different types of choosers that schools have, which is pretty much very, very similar to what I've put as the alternative view. Yes, you could talk about Gowitz, Anna.
yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
what I've put here is that many schools have undergone forced academisation under coalition government for failing to hit academic targets, which limits parent choice. I've talked about the other kind of academisation where schools have been forced to do it, but that is a very good evaluation that you can put forward there. Very much a new right view being put up there at the start, and a more critical view from the likes of Gowitz, Ball and Bow, who've suggested that, right, well, actually, this doesn't create more choice because it's only really creating more choice for those who are the skilled choosers. So that's a really good evaluation
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah. So and that's starting to link it towards things like social class and suggesting that perhaps this benefits middle class parents and
And
disadvantages
yeah,
working class pupils. Yeah.
let's have another go. So
Okay.
again, let's see the student statement. So we've put forward here policies such as pupil premium allow for schools to purchase additional resources in order to counteract the impact of material deprivation. Pupil premium, for those of you who don't know, pupil premium was additional funding that was given to pupils who were seen to be disadvantaged. It was given directly to the school as a top up to the normal funding that the school would receive per pupil. So you may have people reference to pupil premium pupil premium students, and the idea would be is that students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, the government will give additional funding so that then the school can compensate for some of these impacts of material deprivation. But we're going to make a judgment on this, so let's spin the wheel again. Sorry, getting into autumn, I'm getting a cold here.
Oh dear.
So, what evidence do we have that this has worked, or what evidence do we have that might criticise the idea that pupil premium is tackling material deprivation? So, again, we could think of as evidence. Now, with evidence, this can be statistics, it can be pieces of research, but what you're doing is you're judging how effective the pupil premium policy is. So, it's money that's given to the school for pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds. Do we know it's
Earmarked.
effective?
So it's earmarked for those pupils. So schools with more disadvantaged pupils will get more of this money. Kind of, in a way, it's sort of undoing some of the effects of the kind of formula funding that we talk about in relation to marketisation. Oh, Livia's come in again.
Evidence that some schools use the money for different purposes and not for the pupils of disadvantaged backgrounds. Okay, yep, you could use that, and if you had a reference for that, that'd be even better. But there is some evidence that kicks around that it is being used incorrectly. Ofsted reports.
They might provide you with some evidence potentially. They might,
Certainly.
You could see an Ofsted report that says, pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds aren't getting sufficient support in that school or whatever. Yeah, that could.
I'm thinking far simpler than this.
Has it worked? Well, that's a good question.
Has it worked? Yeah.
Has there been an impact on?
Has it worked? And how do we know it's not working?
Maybe think about it in terms of achievement. I'm seeing how we, that might help us come up with some evidence. Has the achievement gap been narrowed since the introduction of the pupil premium? I suppose there's the question.
League tables, that's a good one. A good shout, because you could link that in and sort of say, well, actually, schools who are receiving pupil premium may be lower down in the league tables, and therefore it's shown that there's not an impact.
Yeah, the money hasn't.
What we've gone with is we've gone straight forward with data on free school meals, because the idea is that the pupils who are still materially deprived are still struggling in comparison to their peers. So even though pupil premium funding is being given, it's not having an impact on those who are on free school meals, those it's supposed to help the most disadvantaged.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a connection wall for you now. So this is we're going to initially try and see if we can work out what links these things. Although I'm looking at the time, we might lead you a little towards the links. What you're going to try and do is find 4 groups of 4. So the policies on the board, on the connection board, are in totally random order. They're scattered willy-nilly across the screen. But what we want to do is try and order them into 4 groups of 4. It's a bit like something that happens on Only Connect, if you ever watch that. And I think probably to give us a little bit of a hint to get ourselves thinking about it, at least 3 of the groups might relate to which government introduced them, or under which government or which act of Parliament, so kind of when they were introduced. That might help us. Anyone want to suggest some groups to begin with, and then we can try and fill the groups in? What might they be?
We may have mentioned a couple of these groups already today.
We've definitely mentioned possibly all of them, certainly 3 out of 4. What could they be? Alternatively, you could look at them and think, can you spot something that links them, and that might take you to us. I'm kind of looking at SATs, league tables, formula funding, national curriculum. Anything link those as a possible starting point?
We've got pupil premium and Sure Start. What might link those?
I could see how they might link. Aria's gone specialist schools, league tables, formula funding, and curriculum reform. What do you think might link them?
Maybe if we show the first one.
Yes, that might help
us. A better idea
to us. Okay, so the first set of 4 are SATs, formula funding, league tables, and national curriculum. They were all introduced under the Education Reform Act of 1988. So they were brought in by the Conservative government of Margaret Thatcher. Okay, now that's not to say that all the others come in a single Act of Parliament, because that's things like the Education Reform Act of 1988 are quite rare, where you have these massive, far-reaching reforms. But that might give us at least an idea of the sorts of things that might group some of the others together. So maybe if we think chronologically, kind of what came next? We've got the Conservatives, Margaret Thatcher and John Major governments. What happened after that? For the politics students among you, or the history students.
Or generally, if you've
Oh,
timelined these.
yeah, absolutely. If you've done a timeline of policies,
Sometimes a good way of revising these is to put them into a timeline and then sort of like off the timeline kind of draw in the aims, and then you often get themes with different governments, don't you? Not that governments don't do a number of different policies, but there's often a theme.
so those ones were all
So
to
if I
do
get,
with marketisation.
mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to give you the group, and you can fill them up for me. Then it was the new Labour government that came in after that Conservative government. Which of these policies were introduced by the new Labour government of Tony Blair? Now, there might be more than four, incidentally, because the nature of this type of activity is there's the odd red herring occasionally where it's the best fitting four, because something might fit in another group, because they're not necessarily all which government introduced them.
Mm-hmm.
But potentially. I'm not sure there is actually, but I just thought I'd put that out there just in case. That's probably more something to warn you about with the next group, actually. What do we think? What came under New Labour? What did they introduce out of those? Academies. City academies, absolutely. The initial city centre academies, I know, they were introduced by New Labour. So that's one. Need three more.
Academies is the city centre academies is a really good policy to know because it does fulfil a number of different aims. Not only was it there to actually try and promote equal opportunity, promote better opportunities for kids in working class areas, but it also then can be seen as a marketization policy because it introduced the concept of a different type of school. Often what we call, or often not we call, but Melissa Benn called the New Labour paradox. The idea that even though New Labour looked to tackle inequalities, they also continued the marketisation of education.
Yeah. Anna's got another couple
excellent.
there. Sure
Yep.
Start and Educational Maintenance Allowance. Very good.
Excellent. They are correct
One
as well.
last one. And yeah,
they're the
one
kind
more.
of compensatory side, aren't they?
Yeah. One more in terms of I guess more about the continuing with a degree of marketisation, still with choice of schools, types of schools. There's one more there. It's probably the hardest one maybe to know exactly when they were introduced. It's things like when schools started being called like a sports specialist school or I've given it away now, languages college and things like that. The specialist schools also came under New Labour. It was when Alistair Campbell famously talked about the bog standard comprehensive and got into trouble for that. So those were policies by Labour governments, New Labour specifically. What came next?
I think, can we ID the coalition policies in there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which four of these were definitely introduced under the coalition government? So specialist schools were a Labour policy.
We've got a slight lag, haven't we? We've got a lag of about 5 seconds, so I imagine that's an answer to the last one.
Yeah, so that was that last Labour policy. Coalition ones then, what do we reckon?
Yeah. Specialist schools were able to take, I think it was up to 10% of their intake of a student who showed a real aptitude in their specialist subject, but had also received extra funding for that specific area. So if you're science specialist schools, you might be that you receive additional funding to go and build new science labs, for example.
It was one of those policies that kind of probably didn't work as well in practice as it did in paper, or worked in perhaps some areas of cities where you have quite a few schools close to each other, where pupils could realistically go and do their French lessons at a different school. You know, that kind of idea, which is not possible in a lot of the country. Free schools and pupil premium are both examples of coalition government policies. Fantastic.
Yep.
And good examples of the two sides of the coalition, if you like. Free schools being very much a conservative policy, and pupil premium being more of a liberal Democrat policy. Two more. Both relate to each other, I would say.
Yeah. One that has certainly affected students, probably wouldn't have affected yourself, but certainly has affected students over the last 10 years, particularly in the way in which You know, they're taught.
Yeah, and one which has affected you, but you might
They're
not know it.
examining.
I was going to say, it has affected you, but not know it because you don't know what it was like before.
It's not NVQs,
Yeah, but that might give us a think about what the other set might be. Curriculum reform, Olivia,
yeah.
very good. Yeah, so that was changes to things like, lots of different areas of the curriculum were reformed. When Michael Gove was Education Secretary, changed what history people should learn, what
Massive
books people
change in
should
national
read,
curriculum.
and big changes. The other one is related to that, but more to do with assessment. But it was sort of part of the same process in many ways. A lot of it was about the idea of trying to make education more rigorous. There was an idea that perhaps education wasn't sufficiently rigorous.
Rigorous and robust. That was a phrase that was often used around about that time.
So before this, when you were doing your courses, I'm just trying not to say the words, you might have done modules and do exams throughout the period, like January exams in A levels, and also AS counting to half the final qualification, and that was reformed and changed in a process called linear GCSEs and A levels. So that was the idea of it, the assessment happening at the end of the 2 years. I apologise if someone got in there before we did. So those are your 4 year. Well done, Livia. So what links the last 4 then? T levels, BTECs, MVQs, and VGCSEs. That isn't a typo. That was a particular type of GCSE.
Yeah.
Which has, I think, been largely replaced by things like T levels, etc. But there might be 1 or 2 still.
Yeah. Tended to be things like a GCSE in child development or GCSE in catering, GCSEs in health and social care.
Yeah. Which kind of existed at the same time as there were BTECs and MVQs and things in the same area, but just variations on a similar theme, if you like. What links them all? What have those 4 qualifications got in common? It's not about when they were introduced this time. They were all introduced at different times. We've talked about it quite a bit today.
Think about specialist skills.
Yeah, I suspect as soon as I reveal it, someone will have typed it before I've done it. But we will do it because we've got one last silly activity to finish with. So here we go. But they are all vocational qualifications. Okay, just a little bit of fun just to finish off with. This is an activity that I like to finish off with, and I know it annoys Craig to a certain extent. No, not really.
I've now got to the stage where I've made my peace with it. The only reason it annoyed me is because I could never get them because I never knew the rules.
Yeah. So if you've watched Richard Osman's House of Games, you might have seen something similar, but obviously this is not being copied and is an entirely unique and original idea. So we have a picture. And we have a clue. This one is nothing to do with sociology. The ones that come up in a moment will be about education policies. So we have an elephant, and we have a clue that leads us to Antarctica, and we smash those 2 words together, so it becomes Elephantarctica. So the end of the first one is the beginning of the second one, in terms of how it's written. So Elephantarctica, elephant and Antarctica. It'll make more sense when we do it in a sociological context. So we have a popular singer of yesteryear, and we have the Education Secretary in 2010. If you know either half of the thing, it will help you get the full thing. Aria loves House of Games. Excellent.
Then you will love these live streams.
You'll love Answer Smash.
Yeah.
What do we think? Do you know who that is? Do you know who was the Education Secretary in 2010? We have mentioned him a couple of times, actually. Probably the only Education Secretary we have mentioned tonight.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned the other fella, but, something
something Gove rather than Grove. Yeah, something Gove. But actually it's...
Oh, I said that Grove.
Yeah, it's his full name. It's Michael Gove. So the person on the left is in fact George Michael, and so it was George Michael Gove. There we go. So it was George Michael, the singer. Michael Gove, George Michael Gove. Okay, we've got 2 more of these. I think they're all with celebrities on this occasion. They're not. That isn't always the case. We have another musical entertainer. We've got money to support students staying in education after 16. It is a policy that has been mentioned today. It was Michael Gove, I know. Well done. Yeah, so it was George Michael Gove. Any idea either who the person on the left is or what the policy on the right is, and can we smash them together? This is one that is definitely about how it's written rather than how it's said. I don't actually know how I would pronounce the answer. But it does work. I think let's do the sociology bit. What's the policy called that gave money to students to encourage them to stay in education after 16? Students on lower income backgrounds. It was introduced under New Labour. We've mentioned it today.
I can see it in the chat window up near the top.
Yeah, someone mentioned it earlier. Yeah, in answer to another question.
Let's think of it as the short version of it. 3 letters.
Yes, rather than we're looking for the acronym, if you like. So if I tell you that the person on the left is Eminem, the rapper, Eminem, so it ends with EM. It is EMA, so it was Eminema or Eminema. I don't know how we pronounce it, anyways. Eminem and EMA were the 2 things. Last one. It's a popular singer and a vocational qualification that was first introduced in 1984. You're going to do this one. You're going to be straight in with this one.
I love the way this is possibly the most pupil premium. I love the way it's possibly these are possibly the 3 most contemporary artists I think I've ever seen you use.
Well done, Livia. They were B-Techs, and it was Cardi B. So Cardi B-Tech was the answer. Okay, well done. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for indulging us with the fun at the end there. And well done, some really good answers. And thanks. I'm glad you managed to join us. I'm sorry there was some technical. Yes, well done, Eve. Cardi B-Tech. Sorry, there was some technical issues at the start. I did manage to turn the video public about halfway through, but that probably lost some viewers before that point, so that's a shame. But it will be available on both via where you're watching it through the TutorTube website and just on the TutorTube YouTube channel after today. I will also upload the PowerPoint onto the TutorTube website if you want that for your records in the future. Thanks very much, Craig. What have we got next week? I think it's policies again, is it?
Next week, we're going through the kind of tricky part of the policy that nobody seems to like and everybody panics about come May, which is globalization, the impacts of globalization on educational policy. So it's a little bit of revision of globalization, and then we're going to apply it to the different policies. So if globalization, I know it's one of those things that people struggle with. If we're going to try and sort of give you some of the key kind of features of globalization, and then we'll apply those to policies.
Yeah. Same time, same place. We'll see you then. Okay. Cheers, Craig, and
Bye.
see you soon. Bye-bye.